Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said in this authentic hadith that the strong believer is better and more beloved to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala than the weak believer, but in both of them is good. Be diligent about that which will benefit you and seek assistance in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and don't render yourself incapable. And if something was to pass you by from the affairs of this dunya, then none of you should say, if I would have done such and such, then such and such would have happened, because if opens up the door for the shaitan. When you look at this hadith, there's a number of issues that the Prophet ﷺ tackles in this particular hadith. As the Prophet ﷺ was given what is called jawami'ul kalim, the ability to say small phrases, the meanings behind which are very vast in their meanings. And the first issue that the Prophet ﷺ dealt with was the issue of Iman. As you will find in many texts from the Quran and the Hadith, that many of the issues that the Quran and Hadith deal with or tackle are the issues of Aqeedah, the issues of Iman. And here the Prophet ﷺ, as it is the minhaj of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, is that Iman fluctuates. Iman fluctuates. And no two believers are on the same level of Iman. And this is very important for us to understand, because there are deviant sects who have opposed Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah in this issue. And as a result of that, they have gone astray and led others astray. And they have caused much harm, and atrocities have afflicted this ummah due to the perversion of their understanding of the issues of Iman. And just we'll look at two for the sake of time. First and foremost, Iman inda Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah is that it is qawlun bil lisan, tasdiqun bil janan, wal amalu bil jawarih wal arkan, yazidu bi ta'at ar-Rahman wa yanqusu bi ta'at ash-shaytan. 5 issues. Number 1, it is a belief in the heart. Tasdiqun bil janan. It is a statement on the tongue. Qawlun bil lisan. It is actions on the body parts. Yazidu bi ta'at ar-Rahman. It increases with obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, ar-Rahman, and it decreases with obedience to the shaitan. This is the way that Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, all the way back down to Ibn Munda and others from the ulama as-sabiqun, al-mutaqaddimin min ahl al-ilm, from the previous scholars and the latter day scholars up into our time today. This is the understanding of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah as it relates to Iman. So when the Prophet ﷺ said that the strong believer is better and more dear to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala than the weak believer, but in both of them is good, first we have to understand, what is a believer? What is Iman? How does an individual become a believer? Because not every Muslim is a believer, although every believer is a Muslim. You understand that? As this is clearly explained in the hadith of Jibreel alayhi salam. When he came to the Prophet ﷺ and he asked him about Islam, Iman, and Ihsan. And these are the maratib ad-din, these are the different levels of the religion. And so this clarifies to us that the last issue of Iman, and that is Iman fluctuates. It increases and it decreases. Iman increases and decreases. Some days you wake up, you feel like you're on top of your deen, you feel like your Iman is increased, and then at other days you feel like a straight hypocrite. And this is the case of the believer when his Iman fluctuates. There were 2 groups that opposed Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah in the issue of Iman fluctuating. And that was the Khawarij and the Murji'ah. The Khawarij, they have gone to one extreme in believing that Iman does not fluctuate, that you are either a believer or a disbeliever. And they have many proofs that they use, or what they consider to be proofs from the Quran. From them is the statement of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, وَهُوَ الَّذِي خَلَقَكُمْ فَمِنْكُمْ كَافِرٌ وَمِنْكُمْ مُؤْمِنٌ. And He is the one who has created you, and from you are those who are believers, and from you are those who are disbelievers. And so the Khawarij, they extract from this ayah that there is no in-between. There is no believer with weak Iman. You're either a believer or you're a disbeliever. That's it. Meaning, when you commit a major sin, you're not a believer with weak Iman, you're a kafir who has left the fold of Islam. That your blood is halal, your honor is halal, and your wealth is halal. The other group who oppose this, and this particular issue is very important because, as many people often say about an individual, that his minhaj is corrupt, but his aqeedah is straight. We've heard this statement mentioned on a number of occasions. And I asked Sheikh Ubaid al-Jabiri, hafidhullah ta'ala, about the person who makes this statement, and Sheikh Ubaid said the one who says that an individual's aqeedah is straight, but his minhaj is messed up or corrupt, this individual doesn't understand aqeedah or minhaj. Because aqeedah and minhaj is one and the same. Your aqeedah is your belief system, your foundation, and your minhaj is the path that you traverse to maintain and sustain those set of beliefs. And the Khawarij, because of this belief that Iman doesn't increase and decrease, they killed many of the Sahaba and made takfir on many of the Sahaba. They took Abdullah ibn Khabbab, cut his head off. They took his wife, turned her upside down, split her stomach open, took the baby out, killed the baby, and killed her because of this belief. So how could you dare say that someone's aqeedah is straight but his minhaj is messed up? You are hujjah, you are proof against your own self. You don't understand aqeedah, nor do you understand minhaj. And the other group who oppose Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah in this issue is the Murji'ah. Those who also believe that Iman doesn't increase. That once you accept Islam, you enter into the fold of Al-Islam, you are a believer. Kamilul Iman. Your Iman is complete. You are on the level of Abu Bakr as-Siddiq and Angel Jibril alayhi salam. Regardless to what sin you commit, you will always be a complete believer. Which leads them to take a very mutasahil, a very lackadaisical approach towards worship, towards being obedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and towards fearing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You become like a Christian who believes that because of the fact of, in their belief that Allah sent or God sent Jesus down to die for their sins, that you are sinless. You can commit any sin you want. As you find many of the Muslims, when you order them to fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they say, Iman bi qalb. I'm a believer. I believe in my heart. I just believe. That you commit all type of atrocities. You commit all types of sin. You up to your ears in sin. But you believe in your mind that you are a complete believer. Nothing has changed about you. And from the minhaj of Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah is that the believer lives between fear and hope. إنهم كانوا يسارعون بالخيرات ويدعوننا رغبا ورهبا وكانوا لنا خاشعين. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said about the Anbiya, that they used to hasten to do good deeds, and they used to call on us between fear and hope. And that's the minhaj of the Anbiya wal Mursaleen, the prophets and messengers. And that's the minhaj of Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah, those who are the closest people to the prophets and messengers. And that is that they live between fear and hope. So with that said, we understand Iman. And we understand that Iman fluctuates. Because here in this hadith, the Prophet ﷺ said, Al-mu'minu qawi khayra wa ahabbu ila Allahi min al-mu'minu da'if. That the strong believer is better and more beloved to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala than the weak believer. But in both of them, وَفِي كُلٍّ خَيْرٍ. But in both of them is good. Why? Because the asl of Iman, the origin of their Iman, is still intact. Meaning that when you commit a major sin, it doesn't remove you from the fold of Islam. The origin of your Islam, the basis of your Iman is still intact. And the foundational principles of Iman is as it was discussed in the Quran and as it was discussed in the Hadith of Jibril, and that is to believe in Allah, His angels, His messengers, His books, the last day, the qadr, the good of it and the bad of it. That is the asl of Iman. That is the origin of Iman that does not remove itself from an individual because of the sin he commits. And it's important for us to understand that fact so that we understand where these people are coming from when they come up with these false ideologies, this perversion and deviance that we find spreading amongst the Muslims. Allahu musta'an wa alayhi tuqlan. But the strong believer is better and more beloved to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala than the weak believer. But in both of them is good. So then that would leave us the question to ask ourselves, where are we at? Are you a weak believer or are you a strong believer? What is the determining factor to determine whether you're a weak believer or a strong believer? Your closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Your sila, your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Many of the Muslims don't even have a relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Their worship becomes mechanical movement. As we say, bump your head.